Tails Always Wins by C.A. King. Read by Itsy, Bitsy, Book Bits. Chapter 1. Snow was a liar, and possibly the biggest one in existence. It fell softly from the heavens in the form of angels' wings, delicate and beautiful. Each flake touched down with the weight of a feather, forming a blanket wherever it landed. It had all the makings of a cozy bed, soft, warm, and inviting. The truth was, though, a million feathers wasn't light, and those covers weren't warm. Even its pearly clean appearance was deceiving. White suggested purity. In reality, the frosty flakes were merely a mask, a disguise for the dirt and grime hiding beneath and within. The ground it fell on was Mother Nature's versions of a masquerade ball. The surface of the freshly fallen powder already had a crunch to it, even beneath the tiniest of feet. Brody stumbled forward, his shoe remaining in the last footprint he left. The horizon was a blank canvas waiting for color to be added. A torrential downpour of confetti whipped of exposed skin made sure all who ventured in its path knew this was no dream. The mangled car, left only a few steps back, was almost gone, hidden by nature's cleanup crew. He was the only thing not affected. Jack Frost was no match for a healthy shifter's metabolism. Even at the tender age of 8, his temperature ran high, thawing anything frosty thrown his way. That took care of Brody's immediate physical problems. His injuries were only surface deep, other than shock and grief. Brody fell to his knees, burning a hole in the shimmering surface of the ground beneath him. The wind growled, slapping him across the face for his weakness before picking up death's scent. With bigger fish to fry, a weeping child wasn't worth the effort. The next gusts declared the swirling storm a murderer. Brody threw back his head and let out a hair-curling howl, arguing with the Reaper himself, but to no avail. His parents had been killed, and it probably was all his fault. The tempest's direction changed. Laughter echoed, carried on every gust. The trees swayed, branches cracking their amusement. The tempo of the symphony, mocking his pain, grew louder with the death's standing tail as its conductor. Brody curled up into a ball, waiting for his turn to be carried away to the afterlife, but no one came for him. There was to be no relief from his agony. The insides of his eyelids played a looping vision of flames burning all that he knew. His home, his toys, his safety net, all burned to ash. When he opened them again, there was no blur to his sight. Cold reality loomed overhead, declaring itself the victor in a game he never chose to play when he never had a chance to win. Brody's heart ached, longing for the embrace only a mother or father could give. His cries remained unanswered. Shivers ran down his spine, branching to each and every extremity in his small body. Fear found a home in his soul and had taken up residence faster than the blink of an eye, inviting guilt as its first visitor. Brody gulped back the lump forming in his throat. If this was his fault, he'd make sure it never happened again. A silent vow became a lifelong promise. It was ironic, really. Performing a full shift not only gave him full control over his abilities, but was also the sole reason why it could never happen again. No one else would end up in the untimely grave because of what he was. Loud footsteps trudged through the drifts, heading his way. The powers that be had delivered their verdict, allowing him another chance at life. A glimmer of hope ignited in Brody's soul. That one, if not both, of his parents were given the same reprieve. Perhaps they were still among the living. That was life's cruel joke, lending hope, then snatching it away again, snickering of the anguish it caused. For Brody, such optimism extinguished the moment a pair of chilled arms lifted him. Even through the raging storm, he recognized the scent of a man his parents had called a friend. There was little solace in knowing he was safe. He'd survived, but everything he knew was gone. He buried his face in the man's jacket, melting the layer of snow that had accumulated on it. "It's okay," the man said. "That was a bad accident, but I've got you. I'm going to take you home tonight, and tomorrow we can figure everything out." Brody listened to his voice, but he didn't respond. The meaning lying in the man's words confirmed his worst fears. Even the young understood the finality that came with death's icy grip. There had been other relatives he'd seen pass on. Once life ceased, it couldn't be brought back. That was the one true law of the universe. No one could sort that out. Death was forever. He would never see his parents again. He glanced over the man's shoulders at the pile of white that had been his family's car. Tears flowed freely down his cheeks for those being left behind. He closed his eyes tight, trying to save a picture of their faces. He needed to hang on to their memory. It was all he had left. Time became the new villain. As days, weeks, months, and years passed, he slowly began to forget. Their smiles and voices would be lost among those of countless other souls. That fate no one deserved, especially not them. He reached out, grabbing hold of a fistful of snowflakes to save the moment. By the time he opened his hand, they too were gone. Chapter 2. 20 years later. Brody opened the summons for the 100th time. The contents hadn't changed. That included his name in its entirety, printed front and center on the paper. It was all legal, signed, sealed, and delivered by a well-known local county judge. He had been not so cordially invited to attend a meeting at the Sampson Recreational Facility. The purpose of said meeting, however, had been omitted. Mysteries always spelled trouble. Not knowing what was happening meant surrendering control to someone else. That wasn't easy for anyone harboring an alpha male personality. He managed to suppress his dominant side before, but he wasn't sure that would always be the case. The pungent scent of strife in the air already had him on edge. Something terrible was coming, and he needed to stay calm, razor sharp, if he was going to have any chance of avoiding being caught smack dab in the middle of it. Normally, Brody would have hailed a taxi and arrived in style. That night wasn't meant for fancy rides, though. His tolerance levels were trending toward the lower portion of the placidity charts. A long walk in the frigid February temperatures was the only thing that could cool him off. To him, the pace he set was slow and methodical. To any normal person, he was speed walking. That was only one of the differences between shifters and the rest of society. His strut came to a crawl, nearing his destination. Anxiety attempted a forceful takeover, upping the ante in its bid for control. Tiny beads of sweat formed on Brody's brow. He swatted them away with one hand as he passed by the entrance of the building several times before garnering enough nerve to head to the front door. Once the path was chosen, he moved swiftly, long legs taking 2 of the concrete steps at a time. A vending machine was another opportunity to stall. It had been strategically placed outside, drawing in the spare change of anyone entering as well as those heading out. He shoved his hand in his pocket, pulling out the contents. One finger moved around the treasures it had retrieved. "Damn," he muttered. There wasn't enough to buy even a single stack of gum, let alone a whole pack. His dry mouth was on the verge of expressing its feelings, using an array of profane words. A large coin clanged, dropping into the mix in his palm. Brody's gaze slowly lifted upward. "You look like you could use it," the woman said. "It's tails, by the way." The silver in her eyes shimmered, glistening in the last of the day's light. Their ice beauty scent shivers down his spine. Everything about her spelled trouble, including the sweet floral scent that remained behind to tease his senses. She was one mystery he wouldn't mind unraveling, even if it came with a side order of trouble. Brody glanced down. "It isn't," he argued. "It's actually heads." He chuckled, taking another glimpse of the shiny round piece. "Wait, how'd you do that?" The coin had flipped, tail side up. He scratched his head, swearing it had been heads before. His eyes shifted, catching only a glimpse of the woman's backside strutting away. Long hair swished in time with her hips, leaving him mesmerized by an array of soft pastel colors. He opened his mouth to call out, but before another syllable formed, the building's double doors were swinging shut. A frown etched its way onto his face. He might not have put on his Sunday best, but he certainly wasn't a charity case. His free hand rubbed the stubble on his chin. He probably should have taken the time to shave before attending the meeting. Of course, he hadn't expected to meet anyone worth making an effort for. This woman, whoever she was, had made quite the first impression, but from what he had seen, she was definitely deserving of his further attention. He glanced down at the money she tossed him. The gesture was nothing more than a plastic bone to a starving dog. Still, it was more than anyone had offered him freely in a long time. He cupped his hand, breathing into it. The sniff test was all he needed to make a decision. He needed the gum more than water, especially if he planned on doing any talking at all. Bad breath was offensive in any circle. Chewing took care of offensive odors in his dry mouth and throat to boot. Package in hand, Brody fiddled with the wrapping. The little red line taunted him. Not only was red a trigger color for all shifters, especially those attempting to deal with inner struggles over suppressing their true natures, but the stupid piece of plastic had no end. It wasn't supposed to take a rocket scientist to open a piece of candy. It was literally child's play. The strip was designed to easily lift, creating an opening in the packaging around the top of the gum. This one didn't do that. His fingers fumbled, searching for the end to tug at to no avail. He gave in, his teeth gnawing at the plastic until it tore. Bits of wrapper spat onto the ground. The shiny silver foil of the first stick reflected in the light of the moon. Saliva flowed into his mouth, anticipating the flavor that was about to come. His tongue darted out to share the moisture with both of his lips. The froth and drool of a ravenous scavenger on the prowl for a meal ran down his chin, lending him the appearance of a rabid animal. Looks were deceiving, though. All he wanted was the fresh tingle only peppermint could provide. He wiped his face with a sleeve, hoping no one had been watching. "Ah," he said, relishing the taste. The rest of the packet disappeared in his front pocket, for easy access later if needed. His hand froze on the door handle. A poorly designed sign had been stuck in full view. AAA meeting in room 101. Brody glanced at the paper summons, remembering the number it cited. They were the same. It had to be a mistake. He wasn't by any means an alcoholic. In fact, he prided himself on being strong enough to not need sedation in order to handle everyday life. His head shook as the door swung open. At the very least, he needed to clear up whatever blunder some city official had made. Brody found himself staring at the second door. It was proving no easier to enter than the first one had been. He'd gotten by it riding on the back of sheer pride. This one required a little more nerve and a little less emotion. A water fountain was the perfect way to elude the task at hand. He bent over at the waist, turning the handle slightly. Taps Gone Crazy were an ongoing theme in his life. They had it out for him, even if there was always a technical explanation for any of the malfunctions that happened. He knew all about the soakings a single loose screw was able to cause. It was the number of times plumbing problems happened in his presence that made him skeptical another force wasn't behind the issues. Simply having a magnetic personality shouldn't have an effect on metal. The water trickled upward, forming an arch. Chapped lips absorbed the first touches of moisture before parting to allow full flow to pass. The volume of his slurps increased with every passerby. Technically, he was at the meeting. He side-eyed his watch, his mouth still taking in liquid. It was still a few minutes early. Being late was the worst thing he could do. There was no need to point himself out to anyone who hadn't noticed him in the first place. The back of the room was the place for him, out of sight, out of mind. A second stick of gum folded between his teeth. Even he could only handle so much water before becoming bogged down by its weight. His stomach swished as he waddled his way to the door and glanced inside. An elderly man had claimed the spot at the front of the room. Chairs had been neatly arranged opposite to his. The only other person present was the woman from outside. He shoved both his hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. This was the perfect chance to sort out the details of the summons and be out of there before anyone else arrived. All he needed was the nerve. A push on his back served the same purpose. He stumbled forward, stopping short of the evening's organizers. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice monotone. Brody cleared his throat with a brisk cough into his hand. "Yes," he answered. "I received this." The letter waved high above his head. It was a white flag blowing in the wind and was taken as a surrender. "Have a seat," the man ordered. Brody flinched. He glanced over his shoulder at the 2 seats already occupied. The muscular man who pushed past him had joined the circus they had all been sold to. "I was wondering what exactly this meeting was about. I think there may have been a mistake. I'm not a substance abuser." The audience laughed in the background. "No one said you were." The man tossed his glasses on the desk and glanced up. The white of his hair matched that growing out of both of his nostrils. They flared at the disruption, providing an even better view inside each. "I take it you're referring to the paper stuck to the door. That isn't ours. Good help is hard to find these days, at least when looking outside the human race." He returned his glasses to his face and his attention to the paperwork. Cheap labor isn't always better. Sorry, Brody pressed on. What is this meeting for? The summons doesn't actually say. The man's mouth twitched, a sigh pushing its way past his lips. This is an anger management class. I trust you won't be giving me any problems this evening. Leave your summons on the desk and take a seat. His voice rose with every word. I'll explain more when the rest of your pack arrives. My pack? Brody echoed, his face wrinkling with confusion. I don't have a pack. The arms on his hair stood at attention, warning of confrontation looming overhead. The man's glasses landed with a thump on the desk. They were taking the brunt of his anger. I've had enough out of you. Take a seat or I'll call the authorities. I deal with your sort all the time, and I'm not about to let you lose control and injure anyone. Are we clear?